Welcome to May Channel Forever Celeb. Blake Shelton is not the man the cameras invented. The world only knows the towering Oklahoma giant, the man with the crooked grin and unshakable confidence, the country music superstar who dominated the center stage of the most-watched singing competition in television history for over a decade. The voice that effortlessly filled arenas from Nashville to Los Angeles, commanding attention without ever breaking a sweat. 30 number-one singles, 9 Grammy nominations, a television career that made him a household name in places where country radio was barely a whisper. An empire forged not in glossy boardrooms, but in the red, dusty soil of Oklahoma, built one handshake, one chorus, one honest word at a time. That version of Blake Shelton is real, but it is far from complete. Have you ever looked at someone who seems to have it all, the fame, the fortune, the love, and wondered what weight they secretly carry when the cameras stop rolling? Because behind Blake's easy laugh and stadium-sized charisma, a different story was quietly unfolding. A story marked not only by triumph, but by relentless struggle. A body pushed beyond its limits. A man who wielded food and alcohol as armor against a grief so heavy he never fully learned how to carry it. A reflection in the mirror that no longer felt familiar. Nights in Oklahoma filled with deafening silence when the unbearable weight of loss settled deep in his bones. A brother stolen too soon. A father claimed by time, a marriage shattered beneath the unforgiving spotlight. Like a debt no amount of success, no number of applause could ever erase. This is the true cost of fame, not measured in dollars or cheers, but in the quiet, unrelenting currency of health, peace, and brutally honest self-reflection. The kind of honesty that arrives only after every other option has been exhausted. By 2023, the cracks began to show, and the world took notice. The man who had always seemed built from the bedrock of toughness, made for the outdoors, tall, broad, seemingly indestructible, was looking different. His face fuller, his energy, once the loudest thing in the room, muted, subdued. Photographs circulated on social media met with the kind of cruelty reserved for anyone daring to age or struggle under the public eye. The whispers grew louder. Was Blake Shelton sick? Was something tragic unfolding behind the gates of his Tishomingo ranch that nobody dared to speak about? The answer was not a single shocking event, but a lifetime of accumulated choices. Grief swallowed rather than spoken. Habits forged in heartbreak and never fully released. A body finally refusing to bear the weight of decades spent ignoring its limits. And here's the question nobody dared to ask out loud. How does a man built like a fortress end up so broken inside? And what does it truly take to rise again? What followed was a transformation, not the kind sold in glossy ads or flaunted with fanfare, but the slow, unglamorous, profoundly human kind. The kind that demands a man confront himself with brutal honesty, admitting that the version of strength he had been performing for years was nothing like the real thing. This is that story. From the quiet streets of Ada, Oklahoma, where a 14-year-old boy first learned the meaning of permanent loss, to the sprawling ranch in Tishomingo, where a man in his 40s began the arduous, painstaking work of healing. From the darkest nights of a public divorce, when alcohol became both comfort and catastrophe, to the quiet mornings beside Gwen Stefani, when for the first time, Blake chose to fight for the life still ahead of him. Stay with us until the end, because the moment that finally forced Blake Shelton to change everything isn't the one you expect. And when we reach it, you will understand why it shook him to his very core. Before we begin, if Blake Shelton's music ever found you in just the right moment, the perfect silence, leave a like, because behind every one of those songs was a man paying a price you never saw, and that price deserves to be told. If you want more stories like this one, the real ones, the ones that shatter the legends, hit subscribe. Every week we bring you the truth behind the names the world thinks it already knows. To understand what Blake Shelton became, you first have to understand where he began. And where he began was as far from the Hollywood spotlight as a person can get. Ada, Oklahoma, population just over 17,000, a small town where the land stretches flat and wide, the sky seeming endless, where everyone knows their neighbor, Friday nights belong to high school football, and simple values passed down at the dinner table guide life. Work hard, love your family, be honest, never forget where you came from. It's not a place that often produces global superstars, but it produced one. Blake Tolleson Shelton was born June 18, 1976, to Dorothy Ann Shelton, a beauty salon owner who ran her business with quiet grit, and Rickard Lee Shelton, known simply as Dick, a used car salesman whose hands were always busy and whose word was his bond. They were not wealthy, they were not connected, but they were a family that showed up, that stayed, that built their lives around the people inside it, not the world outside. Blake was the youngest of 3 children. From the very beginning, he seemed born with music in his bones, no one having to put it there. By 12, his uncle taught him to play guitar. By 15, he wrote his first original song. By 16, he won the Denbo Diamond Award, the most prestigious honor in Oklahoma's youth music scene, a recognition that something extraordinary was growing in that ordinary small-town life. But as much as music defined him, it was not the most important thing happening in the Shelton household during those years. That distinction belonged to his older brother, Richie. Before we go further, think of the person in your life who made you who you are, the voice you still hear when making the decisions that matter. For Blake Shelton, that person was Richie, and what happened to Richie changed everything. Richie was 10 years older, a half-brother through their shared mother, Dorothy, whose first husband was Ronnie Musgrove. When Dorothy married Dick Shelton, Dick took Richie in as his own son, never making him feel less than family. Blake would carry that act of quiet grace for a lifetime, the lesson of love chosen over biology, presence over absence. To 14-year-old Blake, Richie was not simply a brother, he was the coolest person in the world. His bedroom was across the hall, and from it came a constant soundtrack: Hank Williams Jr., Waylon Jennings, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Bob Seger, whatever was moving the radio that day. Richie loved it all openly, infectiously. By living his truth, he taught Blake the architecture of American music without ever meaning to teach a lesson. Blake absorbed every note, every album, every conversation about songs and their meaning through the thin walls. He wanted to be Richie, not like children admire and move on, but in the deep, permanent way that shapes identity before you even realize it's happening. Then, on November 13, 1990, the world went silent. Richie, 24 years old, rode as a passenger in a car driven by her girlfriend on a rural road outside Ada. The sun was low, blinding. Her car crested a hill and didn't see a school bus stopped ahead, loading children. The collision was catastrophic. Richie, her girlfriend, and her 3-year-old son all perished. 3 lives erased in a single moment of ordinary tragedy. Blake was 14. He later described the aftermath as the world going silent, a silence so complete it felt physical, like something had been removed from the air itself. For weeks he reached for the phone to call Richie, to share some joke or moment, only to remember again and again no one was there to answer. His father, Dick, sat him down and said something Blake would carry forever. "You will never get over this. You'll just have to learn to live with it." It was not a comfort, but it was honesty, and in its honesty the most valuable lesson Blake ever received. He learned grief is not something to fix or move past, but to absorb and integrate until it becomes part of life's fabric, not a hole in it. But absorbing grief comes at a cost, one that doesn't announce itself, but accumulates in choices made when the pain has no words. The drinks reached for,
the silence chosen over conversation, the relentless forward motion of ambition masquerading as healing, but often just avoidance. At 17, Blake left Ada, barely out of high school, and moved to Nashville, chasing the only thing that made silence bearable: music. Richie's music, the records from the room across the hall, now living inside him, demanding release. He carried Ada, he carried Richie, he carried the silence, a silence no applause, no stage, no spotlight could drown out. What would you have done at 17? Stayed safe at home, or packed it all and chased the voice that made the silence bearable? Share your answer below. It took Blake Shelton more than 20 years to realize that silence had followed him all the way to the top, and that until he faced it, it would keep costing him more than he could afford.